So first thing I'm going to do is I am going to pose a question. And here's the question, okay? And what I want you to do, after I ask the question, I want you to discuss this question with the person next to you, right? So in groups of 2, or maybe 3 if there's 3 in a row or so. And I want you to discuss this question, and then we're going to ask your opinion, right? So it's interactive, okay? So the question is, right? Do you believe, and this is, I'm not sure if there's a right or wrong answer at this point in time, but we'll think about it as we go. Right. Do you believe that there is a definite time that Jesus is planning on coming back? He's got a day in mind picked? Or is he waiting for certain things to happen, his people to get ready? Is it conditional? So there's, he's got the time, or he's got things that he's waiting to happen, and then when things are ready, he's going to come back. Right? Do you understand the question? Right?
No.
Is there... No? Okay. Here's the question, okay? Does God know a specific day? Has God already determined a specific day that he's going to come back?
No.
Okay, so you can't say your answers. You have to discuss, okay? Does God have a specific day in mind? So he said, October 22nd, 2012 or something. Yeah, they're just throwing out a date, right? Does he have a specific day in mind? Or, that's okay, okay.
No, I'll hold this. You can put that on. You can talk.
No, it's okay. Don't worry. Yeah. While you guys are talking, I'll put it on, okay? So, is there a specific day that God has in mind, or is it conditional? Certain things, he's waiting for certain things to happen before he decides to come back. Okay? So when I say go, I mean, between the person in your pews, I want you to discuss for 2 minutes, and then we're going to take your opinions, and you can say your opinions, all right? So, ready? Everybody understand the question? Yes? Okay? All right, go ahead, go 2 minutes discussion time, okay? We read this text verse yesterday. Prophecy alone holds the answers to the questions of thinking people. People who are thinking about what's going on, thinking about what's happening in this world. The prophecies hold that answers to the question, and they can really enlighten people, and it could be a tool to use to convince people about the truth of the Bible. So prophecies are important. But I also really like Old Testament stories. I love stories. I love Old Testament stories. My kids always used to say, tell us a story. Kids love stories. I love stories. And there's a story that I think most of the people know. It's the story of Daniel in the lion's den, right? Everybody knows the story. Anybody not know the story of Daniel in the lion's den? Okay? Daniel, he was, advisor, second in command to King Cyrus, right? In Babylon. And the other princes were jealous of him, and they didn't want, they wanted to, we got to get Daniel somehow, we got to mess him up and find something to make him fall. But they couldn't find anything wrong with Daniel, so they said, okay, we're going to have to trick the king, right? We're going to have to make a false law, a bad law. And so they told the king, oh king, you're so great, and we should make a law that nobody could pray to anybody else but you for the next 30 days, right? And so they made this law. And so they went to the king and said, oh king, you're so great, we should honor you by making this law. And so the king thought, okay, sounds like a good idea. And so he made this law. In Daniel 6 it says, now, O king, establish the decree and sign the writing, that it may not be changed according to the laws of the Medes and the Persians, which alters not. So he made this law, it could not be changed. So Daniel hears about this law, and he thinks, okay, they're out to get me. I know they're out to get me. But of course, Daniel was true to God, and he said, I'm not going to change anything that I'm doing. So he goes up, he opens the windows to his house, and he prays out loud to God. of course, the other princes sees that, and they go and report him to the king, and they say, "King, you know, you can't change the law. You have to throw Daniel in the lion's den." Right? I always found that very frustrating. Like I said, what kind of king is that? Right? Like, kings should be able to do whatever they want, right? Why, you know, every king seems to do whatever they want to do. Why, in this occasion, could this king not change the law? Didn't that kind of bug you when you were a kid listening to the story? And like, you're the king, change the law.
Yeah.
Right? So, but the law could not be changed. The laws of the Medes and Persians could not be changed. So Daniel gets thrown in the lion's den. But one of the things I really like about this story, and Daniel is such an amazing person, and so powerful, you know. When he was about to be thrown into the lion's den, who was the one that had faith? Who had the faith in God, that God was going to protect him?
The king. The king did.
The king did. If you read in verse 16, Daniel 7:16, he says, "The king commanded that they brought Daniel and cast him into the den of lions. Now the king spake and said unto Daniel, Thy God, whom thou servest continually, he will deliver thee." Right? What an amazing testimony that is. The king, you know, Daniel had such an influence on this heathen king that the king had faith that Daniel's God would protect him. And so he put him into the lion. I don't think he threw him. He put him into the lion's den and closed the entrance. And of course, we know the end of the story. God protected Daniel from the lions, and you know, when he got out, they threw the other guys in, and their whole family, and that was the end of those princes. But I was reading that story the other day, and I came to a very interesting thought, and I want to share that with you this morning. I'm going to go through a little bit of a history of what happened in Israel, or to the Jews at that time, right? Do you remember then that, you know, King Cyrus, I'm sorry, this wasn't Cyrus, this was Darius. I keep saying Darius. The king before Darius was King Cyrus. Now when King Cyrus, you remember this history, right? Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, took over and destroyed Jerusalem, right? And then the Medes and the Persians came and captured Babylon, killed the king, and took over. And now the Medes and the Persians were the governing power of the whole world, right? And it was very interesting that the Medes and the Persians had a very advanced culture. And their idea was that, okay, we're now the rulers of this world, of the then known world. They controlled everything. But they didn't want to control every little country. Their idea was, well, each country should have their own individual government, and then the leader of those governments can report back to us, right? More of a distributed government, more modern style government. And so Cyrus wanted to send the Jews back to establish their own city, their own nation back in the land of Israel. And so in 538 BC, King Cyrus said, "Oh, okay, Jews, you guys can go back and build your temple and start your country all over again." Right? So he wanted the Jews to go back to there. Now, of course, there was somebody who didn't really want that to happen. And you can read about that in Daniel 10. And that was Satan. Satan did not want the Jews to go back to Israel. He would prefer the Jews to stay in Babylon. That's a good message for today. And so he says, the prince of the kingdom of Persia, who's that? The prince of the kingdom of Persia, that's referring to Satan. Withstood me 1 and 20 days, but lo, Michael, one of the princes, came to help me, and I remained there with the king of Persia. So this is talking about a time. So Cyrus is trying to decide whether or not to send the Jews back to Israel, right? And that would fulfill Jeremiah's prophecy that the Israelites could go back. But Satan was trying to oppose, he's probably trying to put into the mind of Cyrus, no, you don't want to send those Jews back, right? And so Gabriel, the archangel, not the archangel, sorry. Gabriel was the angel there trying to fight with Satan to try and help Cyrus make a good decision. And eventually, Michael, Jesus, came and helped out that situation, right? To allow Cyrus, to influence Cyrus to send those people back to Jerusalem to create the country. And so it did. So King Cyrus allowed the Jews to rebuild the temple. And that was in 538 BC. So he sent this decree. So what we talked about this morning, remember, so the Israelites go back, right? And they start building the temple. And what happened? The Samaritans were there, right? And were the Samaritans happy about that? No, they were not very happy about the Jews being there at all. And so they tried all kinds of things. They were trying to break things, so they build up part of the thing and they try and break it down or whatever. And so they were trying to disrupt the work. And finally, after quite a few years, one of the things they did was they sent a letter back to the king. Now, King Cyrus had died by this time, and there was a new king. And his name was Darius, right? It's the same Darius that threw Daniel in the lion's den. And so the Samaritans sent this letter and said, these Jews, they're bad. They're plotting against you, king. They have no business rebuilding this temple, right? This is probably almost 17 years had passed since Cyrus had made the decree. So quite a bit of time had passed, right? And so Darius said, okay, well, let me find out. So what happened was, the Samaritans opposed the building of the temple, and they send this letter to Darius. Darius says what? Well, in Ezra, it tells us what he did. Darius the king made a decree, and a search was made in the house of the rolls, where the treasures were laid upon in Babylon. So what did Darius do? When the Samaritans said, oh, these guys are bad, they shouldn't be building a temple, Darius went back and checked the records, right? To see, are they doing something illegal? And of course, what did he do? He found the decree that Cyrus had made back in 538, right? And he found this decree and he said, oh, no, they're doing exactly what the decree said, right? The law of the Medes and Persians could not be altered, right? So the decree that Cyrus had made could not be changed. So even though the Samaritans came to protest against the Jews, the law could not be changed. And so Darius said, okay, that law is valid. The decree is valid that Cyrus made. Not only that, then I'm going to make my own decree. And he made a new decree, and he gave him more money and more means and more support to help continue the building of the temple. And so the law of the Medes and Persians cannot be changed. God was using that to help the Israelites. He had planned well in advance to make sure that people could not stop the work of building the temple, right? And so way back from when we heard the story of Daniel, this whole idea of the laws of the Medes and Persians cannot be altered was a very important factor for looking after God's people. Is that wonderful? Yes?
Amen.
God was planning ahead. He sees ahead, right? Omniscience. Max says he's omniscient. Not only is he omniscient, he's a very good tactician. So he's putting into places important parts to make sure that his work will continue. And so the laws of the Medes and Persians could not be altered, allowed the Jews to continue on the work. Well, guess what happened? Quite a few years later, same thing happened again. The Samaritans complained again, now this time to King Artaxerxes. Right? He was the new king. And Artaxerxes said, okay, stop building the temple. They were actually trying to build the walls of the city of Jerusalem at this time, right? And they burned down the gate of Jerusalem because King Artaxerxes said, okay, stop what you're doing until I check the scrolls. Right? And this time, this is 457. This is almost 70 years after the original decree was made. What happens? King Artaxerxes checks the scrolls again, right? You know, is what the Israelites doing, is it legal, right? And so he finds that, oh yes, it was written in the first decree by Cyrus, and then Darius also made another decree that that work should be done. And then now this time, King Artaxerxes made another decree and says, yes, not only should they build the temple, but they should build the walls of the city and rebuild the city, right? And so, and then he gave them all of the, gave them a whole bunch more money, gold and things, and all the artifacts from the temple. He returned to them, and so the city of Jerusalem could be built, rebuilt. And again, because God put in place a government who had laws that would protect the Israelites. And that's an important day, right? 457. Is that a very important day for us? Mm-hmm. Yes, it is. Because that was the start of, as we talked about, the important prophecies of the Bible. So the Jews continued to build, and finally rebuilt the city of Jerusalem. This was probably sometime around 450 BC. Okay? 450 BC. And as we talked about this morning, right, he brought a financial crisis to the people to wake them up, to try and push them to rebuild the city, right? We talked about that this morning. God really, really, really wanted that temple rebuilt. He really wanted that city rebuilt. Okay? Because, why? Christ was coming, right? Jesus was going to come to the temple. So he wanted the building rebuilt. But wait a minute. When was the city rebuilt? Around 440 BC, right? When did Jesus come? When was Jesus born? Trick question.
4 BC.
Huh?
4 BC.
Oh, excellent. Good advice.
I just know the day.
Huh?
AD1.
No. About 4 BC. 4 BC. Yeah. Okay. Jesus was born around 4 BC. He would have been dedicated at the temple just around 3 or 4 BC. Okay. That's 400 years. Why the rush? Why was God pushing his people to rebuild the city when Jesus wasn't even going to be there for another 400 years? He was probably dedicated around 3 BC, and then he would have been starting his ministry around 27 AD. So almost 480 or 470 years before he would start his ministry. What was the rush? Why did God want his people to finish building that temple so soon? 400 years, you know.
Because the Greeks are coming.
Excellent. Because the Greeks were coming. Right? Right? The gold head, Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece. Greece was next on the line. Alexander the Great would come. It was actually just around the same time, around about 500 BC. Alexander the Great started coming into power. And right about that time, Xerxes and Alexander the Great. Xerxes was the king of Persia, and Alexander the Great, they started fighting, you know. And that was around the same time, you know, the Spartans, you know, you've heard the story about the 300 Spartans. It's all around the same time era, right? Xerxes would have fought against the Spartans, and then Alexander the Great came later and defeated Xerxes, and then eventually Alexander the Great would have defeated all the Persians, and now he was the ruler of the then known world, right? Now, was Alexander friendly to Israel?
No.
No, he was not friendly to Israel. There was no godly influence in Greece, right? In Persia, you had Daniel, and Daniel, I mean, he's amazing because he not only influenced the king of Babylon, he then again influenced the king of Persia, right? But there was no Daniel in Greece. There was no influence like that. And so he would not have supported the building of the temple in Jerusalem. As a matter of fact, some of the Greek kings tried to desecrate the temple, right? So there was no support of building the temple. And so God knew this was coming, right? He prophesied that Greeks were coming. And so he knew he had to get that temple built before Alexander the Great came into power, or else that temple would not be built. At least, it would have been a very difficult thing for the Jews to build the temple. And so you can see why God was pushing them so much, right? Because if they hadn't got it done in the time they had, then they would have been in big trouble. They would have not been able to finish the work, rebuilding the temple, building the city, and allowing Jesus to come into that temple. Is that interesting? Okay. Yeah? Okay. So, when we think about prophecy, right? So that day 457 BC was very important because it started a very important prophecy. And we can read it in Daniel chapter 9. 70 weeks are determined upon thy people and upon thy holy city to finish the transgression and to make an end of sins and to make a reconciliation for iniquity. That was talking about the birth and the crucifixion of Jesus to finish the first part of the plan of salvation, right? To finish the transgression, to make an end of sin. So that's crucifixion of Christ. And to bring an everlasting righteousness and to seal up the vision and prophecy and to anoint the most holy. Right? Therefore, no one understand from the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem unto Messiah the priest shall be 7 weeks, 62 weeks. So that's actually 69 weeks. Now, in the Bible, we know that 1 week, or sorry, 1 day, when it's a prophecy, 1 day equals a year, right? So 70 weeks means 490 days, right? And that means 490 years. So from the time, 457, right, that's when Artaxerxes said, go back and finish building the city, to the time when Jesus was crucified, started his mission and crucified, was 486 years. Exactly according to the prophecy. And then to the end of 34 AD, that was the prophecy. The whole 70 weeks ends in 34 AD when one of the disciples of Jesus, Stephen, was stoned, and the Jews ultimately rejected Christ. So that was this whole 70-week prophecy. But that started at this rebuilding of Jerusalem. So that was a very, very important time frame, right? So from rebuilding Jerusalem, 490 years, it was part of that prophecy. There was another prophecy that tagged along with that. So I think most of us as Seventh Adventists should know this. If not, it's very important for us to know. Right? This is the 2,300-day prophecy, which we also talked about this morning. So it's written in Daniel 8, 13 and 14. I heard one saint speaking to another saint, and said unto that certain saint which spake, how long shall be the vision concerning the daily and the transgression of desolation, to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden under foot? And he said unto me, unto 2,300 days, and then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. So this is that prophecy, 2,300 days. That actually means 2,300 years. And that prophecy started at the exact same time, right? It started at 457, same start as the 70 weeks that we just talked about. But this one went all the way for 2,300 years and would have ended in 1844, right? Hopefully most of you know that as Seventh-day Adventists. What happens in 1844? You remember? It's the start of the judgment, right? It's the judgment. It's what we call the Heavenly Day of Atonement, right? The Day of Atonement was a day, important day in the Jewish year. Remember, in the Jewish sanctuary, when the Jews every day the Jews would come and offer sacrifices, right? Every day. And that represented the cleansing of their sins. If every time they sinned, they would come and offer a sacrifice, and they would have their sins cleansed. But those sins were placed into the most holy place. And then once a year, the priest would go in and cleanse all the sins in the most holy place. And that would take away all the sins of the Israelites for the whole year. Right? That was kind of the pattern that was taking place on the earthly sanctuary. Right? And so, but the earthly sanctuary was a representative of what happens in the heavenly sanctuary. Right? But in the heavenly sanctuary, we know it's not once every year that this happens. It says once and for all, right? Hebrews says that Jesus would come in, our heavenly high priest Jesus would go in one time for all times and cleanse the temple. And so this is what happened in 1844. Jesus moved into the heavenly sanctuary and started to do his work of judgment. So that's a very, very important time. The cleansing of the heavenly temple, the final judgment, begins in 1844. I think most of you know that. What's the work that we have to do in the cleansing of the temple? Well, this is our part in that. Denying ungodliness and worldly lusts, we should live soberly and righteously and godly in this present world. And then who gave himself for us that he might redeem us from all iniquity and purify unto himself a peculiar people, zealous for good works. That's the whole idea of this cleansing the temple. Cleansing the temple, in a way, what did we learn this morning? We are the temple. Right? We're the temple. So God is cleansing the temple in heaven, but he also wants to cleanse the temple here on earth, us. And so that's the work that's going on right now. But it's a very interesting thing, and I've talked about this before. We know, looking at our church history, and also the history of the world, that there's good evidence that God tried to come back once already. We're waiting for his second coming, but there's good evidence that God had tried to return once before. And we know this. 1844, the judgment began. And here's the sequence of events here. In about the 1860s, there was this terrible civil war in the United States. There was a lot of lives lost, a lot of damage there. And then after that, they had a big, long economic depression. Right? A financial crisis, if you will. It lasted more than 5 years. And the morality of the people went down, and people were desperate, and the country was falling apart. And so what happened? Well, the religious people started to come to power and say, we need to fix this country. And they started to try and legislate, make laws to try and make people better. Right? Legislated morality. And it came to the point that in 1888, the United States Senate was trying to pass a law that would make Sunday worship mandatory. They were trying to pass the Sunday law. Right? And all of this was in fulfillment of many of the prophecies that were going on. Many of the prophecies that were in the Bible. We also know... Oh, I forgot about that. I put some... See, this is a picture of, it's a bank run. This is in a newspaper. Somebody had, this is a newspaper. If you can read it, it's actually 1873. I think this was the Philadelphia paper. And they had drawn the picture of people trying to break into a bank and get their money out because they were closing down the banks. Right? That's what that picture is. This is a picture of people debating in the Senate. I don't actually have a picture from 1888 because I don't think they had cameras back then. So that's just a picture of the Senate. That's all. Good, good. Excellent. What else was going on then? We know there was tremendous religious revival that was going on. Ellen White was around that time, and Joseph Bates, and James White. There was a tremendous amount of revival, religious revival that was going on. There were many new religious denominations that had sprung up. People were again expecting the second coming of God, second coming of Jesus. And we know that, Ellen White even talks about that the loud cry was starting, right? She talks about the loud cry beginning, the outpouring of the Holy Spirit was beginning. God was trying to put things in play to get himself, get the people ready so he can come again pretty soon. It's very evident from looking at our church history and from the history of the world that this was what was happening. And yet, it didn't happen. And we know, we can look back at the events back in 1888 and see what happened. It really came back to the lack of commitment by our members, that we just were not ready to finish the work that God had given to us. There was men, we were looking too much to the pastors and to the conference to do the work and lead everybody, and there was not enough individual consecration and effort to the work. And so the work, even though there were pockets of it that were really going hard, going fast, the work did not get finished, and God ultimately could not come back. So I asked the question before, God tried to push his people in the time of the Jews to rebuild the temple, right? Why? Because the Greeks were coming, right? So let me ask the question, why was God trying to come back in late 1800s? Do you think he had a reason? Right? Many signs pointing towards the second coming happening soon. This is in the 1880s. It's a question I asked earlier. Does God have a specific date in mind, or is he just depending on when his people eventually get ready? And why was God apparently in a hurry to get his people ready? Well, let's talk about this one for a second, okay? Does God have a specific date in mind, or does he just kind of change things as it goes? Well, let's look back to another Bible story, Moses. Remember the story of Moses? He takes the children of Israel, and they go through the Red Sea, and they get the Ten Commandments, and they come to the land of Canaan, and what did he do? They sent 12 spies in to the land of Canaan to see, is this a good place? What are the people like, right? And what happened? Well, we know the story. 12 spies came back. 10 of them said, they all said, yeah, it's a great city, it's a great country, it's a beautiful place, it's all what God said it would be. But 10 of them said, but there's giants live there, and there's no way that we could get into that country. We would get killed by all these giants, right? But remember, Caleb and Joshua said, yes, that's true. There are giants, but our God is more powerful than those giants. Right? But what happened? Who did they listen to? They listened to the 10. And so they decided as a group that they were not going to go into the promised land. And God was very displeased with that. And he said this, in Numbers 14, he said, after the number of the days in which you search the land, even 40 days, each day for a year shall you bear your iniquities, even 40 years, and you shall know the breach of promise. Right? So God had made a promise, and who breached the promise? The people breached the promise. And so they were destined to wander the wilderness for 40 years because they breached the promise that he had made with God. Right? And so God had a specific plan to take these people to the promised land, but when they breached his promise, he had to make a new plan. And he said, 40 years you're going to wander in the wilderness, but after 40 years, I'll take you there. So, does God have a plan? Yes, he does have a plan. But sometimes those plans are conditional upon certain things that we do. But it's also is a good template for us too, right? If God already tried to come back once, do you think he's going to come back, try again and again and again? Or like Moses' time, you know, he tried it once, and the second time around, he's going to make really sure that his people are ready, which is what he did. He made sure that every single person who had disobeyed over the age of 18 died before he came back to the promised land again. He was going to make absolutely sure that the people he was going to bring back around for the second time were going to be ready to go to the promised land. Okay, so now the other question. Why was God apparently in a hurry to get his people ready in 1888? I want you to think about world history for a bit. By the time 1903 came along, Ellen White said it was too late. It was too late. And she wrote an article about what could have been, what might have been, she wrote. You know, she had this vision of people repenting and whole churches becoming converted and working for the Lord. And she had this vision, but then she realized, oh, this is what might have been had we gotten ourselves ready. But it was too late. Why was it too late? Well, in 1910, around 1917, I guess it was, certain things started to happen. One of them was there was a huge movement in the world. And it was influenced by the writings of this guy named Karl Marx. And this communist movement was sweeping across the world. And this guy here, Joseph Stalin, he led this Russian revolution against the czars in Russia. And it was quite brutal. It was quite brutal. The estimates range from about 20 to 60 million people killed. He massacred at least 20 million, but more likely it's somewhere in, the apologists say it's 20 million. Other people say it's 60. It's probably somewhere in the middle there. That's a lot of people, right? That is a lot of people being massacred. Particularly anybody related to church, the Russian Orthodox Church. They were just wiped out, massacred. Right? The whole church was almost completely wiped out by Stalin and his people. Right? That was the Russian Revolution. Followed quickly by World War I. There were 15 million people killed in World War I. Another 20 million wounded. 35 million people were affected by World War I. Well, that was quickly followed by this guy here, Adolf Hitler, started his movement, his Nazi movement in the 1930s, and that resulted in World War II, and we know about the atom bomb that was dropped. And then shortly thereafter, there's the Korean War, and we also know the Chinese Revolution, right? Another 40 to 60 million deaths happened in that Chinese Revolution. When you add them all up, the time period between around the early 1900s to the middle of the 1900s, 1950s, 1960s, a lot of people died. And I know people die all the time, but dying under these conditions was a terrible, terrible thing, right? Was God trying to avoid all of this? Just like God was trying to make sure that the temple was built before Alexander the Great came along? I don't know. I can't give you the answer, but I can give you, my view is that yes, God sees all the things going to happen, right? And he didn't want to see all of these terrible atrocities happen. I don't believe so. But we didn't really leave him much choice because we couldn't get the work done. And so God had to change his plans. Now, did God know that that was going to happen? Probably. He knows all, right? so even though he had planned to come back earlier, we didn't let him. We didn't get the job done. And so all these terrible atrocities happened, and here we are. But something happened about 20 years ago. All of those communist countries that had just been built up over the last 50 years, they started to change. The Berlin Wall fell in 1989, and the Soviet Empire started to collapse, and all of the communist countries became open again. Even China, who's still a communist country, is now much more open. One of the fastest growing churches in China is the Seventh-day Adventist Church. I think the largest congregation in the world is in China. Places that were not open for the last 50 to 60 years are now open to the gospel. Right? All of a sudden, things have changed again. There was a time period where, if you think about the time between 1910 and about 1960, there was no way to spread the gospel to the whole world. There were places in the world that just were not friendly to the gospel. And if you went in there, you were killed. You could not preach the gospel. The gospel work was not going any further. But today, that has all changed. The gospel could be preached in almost all countries in the whole world. Now, the only places that are probably a bit more difficult right now are the Islamic countries, right? But I think that's going to change pretty soon as well. And that's one of the things that might be another good milestone to see what happens in these Islamic countries. Thessalonians says, "For when they shall say peace and safety, then sudden destruction will come upon them as a travail upon the woman." Now, you can take that text two ways, right? People are going, oh, peace and safety, peace and safety. They're looking for peace and safety, and they're not looking for the return of Jesus. But also at the same time, you can say, you know what? We have peace and safety now, and maybe God's saying the door's open again to get this gospel message preached. Because as we talked about last night, I think we have a different world that's going to be upon us in a very short while. This economic collapse is going to create an environment, again, that's going to be unfriendly towards the preaching of the gospel. Countries are going to become much more protective about, their whole economy, and they're not going to welcome people coming from Canada or the United States to preach the gospel, change the way that people think. There's going to come a time fairly soon, I believe, that this peace and safety is not going to be available. And so now's the time for us to be preaching the gospel. The world is more open to the gospel now than it has been in the last 100 years. And so it's our opportunity. Is God giving us another window of opportunity? That's my question to you. Does God know there's a specific date in mind? I believe He knows what the day is. He knows the events that are coming around. Did He pick a specific date? I don't know. I can't answer that question. But I do know that there's a big window of opportunity now. And whether you believe that He's picked a specific date or whether you think it's conditional, that doesn't change our responsibility one bit, does it? Right? Either way, we are responsible for God to finish the work of the gospel. And it's going to take everything that we have to finish that gospel work. One thing, actually I skipped this slide yesterday, but last night because we were running out of time, but I just wanted to, not this. Oh, sorry, here we go. Mark of the beast. I skipped the slide yesterday, but I just want to come back to it. He says, he causes, remember the mark of the beast. He causes both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, that no man might buy or sell except he had the mark of the beast for the or mark of the name of the beast for the number of his name, right? You know this text, right? Mark of the beast, right? But we also know in Revelation 6, this is talking about the second coming. It says, the kings of the earth, and of the great men, and the rich men, and the chief captains, and the mighty men, and every bondman, and every free man, hid themselves in the dens and in the rocks and the mountains. And you caused the rocks to fall on him and hide him from the wrath of the Lamb. Right? We know that text too. What's the difference between those two? Well, I know they're very different. They're different texts, but if you look at it, you know, small and great, rich and poor, free and bond. You look it down here, kings of the earth and the great men. So they've got the great men. The rich men, rich. Where's the poor man? Interesting. No poor man here hiding themselves, right? The chief captains, the mighty men, the great men, it's all there. But the poor man is not in here. Where are the poor men? Oh, it's God's people. I'm not saying that, you know, it's not righteousness by poverty, but why aren't the poor of the world there? He said, hearken, my beloved children, my beloved brethren, have not God chosen the poor of this world, rich in faith, and heirs of the kingdom, which he has promised to them that love him? So what's James saying? You know, it's the poor of this world, right? Those of us who give our all for the gospel, who use all of our means and our energies and our efforts to spread the gospel. The poor of the world, but rich in faith. That's who he's calling on to be heirs to the kingdom. James goes on to say, your gold and silver are cankered, and your rust of them shall be a witness against you, and you shall eat your flesh as it were fire. You have heaped treasure together for the last days. You know, we're given our resources. We talked about this last night. God's given us our resources to use in his work. You know, God doesn't want us to be poor, but he's going to give us riches beyond what we can even imagine in heaven. The time for riches is not now. The time for riches will come later as we get our reward. But today, he's calling us to use all of our efforts, all of our energies, all of our means to fulfill the gospel work. And we have a window of opportunity now, like never before, to finish that work. And so, I believe that it's time. This is the last slide I want to share with you. 2 Chronicles 7. If my people, which are called by my name, shall humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then will I hear from heaven and will forgive their sins and will heal their land. If we'll humble ourselves, well, Ellen White said, you know, don't ask God to humble you, because if God humbles you, you won't like it. He said, humble yourself. He said, humble yourself before the Lord and pray and seek his face. And when we do that, he will forgive us. He will heal our land. You know, I think healing our land, that's a metaphor for, you know, rebuilding that city, right? Rebuilding that country of God, that we can bring all the peoples, the forces of the Gentiles, as we talked about this morning. All these people will come into his church, and he'll be ready. That's the spirit that we need today as we head into this last days of the world and this financial crisis and all the calamities that we're going to see. Let's humble ourselves before God, and he will look after us and give us all of our needs and make sure that his work is finished. You know, it's his work that's being finished, right? It's not our work that's finished. It's his work. We're his instruments to accomplish that. That's my prayer. That's what I hope for myself, my family, our church, our community. That if we could dedicate ourselves more to God, that would be my hope and prayer for you. I'm going to. There's a Actually, I had one question. So we're going to, I kept this fairly short because I wanted to make sure that we had any time for any questions. If you've any questions or comments that they wanted to make about any of the sessions that we've had, these past 3 sessions. I had one question here about unions. Last night we talked about unions and how Ellen White said that the unions will bring about a time of trouble such as never had seen this world has seen. The question is, historically, trade unions have served an important role in preventing workers from being abused or exploited by employers. Last night you discussed the negative role of unions in politics and the economy. How do you reconcile these two views? Unions as a necessity, as necessary versus union as negative? So that's a very good question. I do believe that unions have an important role still to make sure that people have safe and fair working environments. I believe that. It's still true. I think the thing that we have to worry about is as this world gets to be a more difficult place to live in, we saw what happened in Greece, right? It was austerity measures. The government said, okay, we have to cut our budgets, we have to cut salaries, we have to cut our spending.
That's happening here in Toronto now.
Yeah, and as that goes, then what's the response of people? They're trying to protect their own selves, right? Now, if it's about working conditions or safety, that's one thing, but if it's just about money, right? I think that's where it comes down to. If it's only about money, and then they're willing to become very violent about protecting their money, I think that's where we have to draw the line at supporting the unions. Like, there's no calls for violence. We've seen examples of very peaceful demonstrations, right? Very peaceful demonstrations are effective, but when they start to become violent and expect you to join them in being violent, I think that's where you have to draw the line. We have to be very careful. And again, it's all about money. If I don't do what the union says, then they'll kick me out of the union, and I won't get the same wages, or makes it becomes very difficult, right? If you cross the picket lines, and then you go back to work after the strike, like, you're not going to be very liked by your peers, right? So there are some very difficult situations that could arise from being in a union. But I don't think there's anything specifically wrong with unions. But if they get to violence, then I think that's where we have to be careful. Okay. Is there any other questions or comments that people want to make about anything that we've talked about in this last few minutes? Okay, Pastor has a question. Oh, here.
You said that there was a long depression, 1870,
1873.
1873. And
5
then,
years.
5 years. And then there was another depression, 1929 and 1929. And now we had a Lehman shock,
Wow.
2008.
Yeah.
Yes. And next one is coming. Some people say another depression is coming. I'm curious about how big this depression will be.
Okay, so my view, and I think other economists will share this view, is that the depression started in 2008 and we've not really gotten out of it, right? Because the one good measure is to look at jobs, right? Has jobs recovery really come back? Well, in Canada, yes, but in the United States, they're still at 9% unemployment, right? So, did the economy really recover? Mathematically, they have enough GDP. That's how they measure depression or growth. But when it comes to jobs and people's economic status, right, and their wealth, people are poorer. People are poorer than they were in 2008, and the general people have not recovered. More people are unemployed today than there were in 2008. So, I think a lot of people would suggest that we started the Depression in 2008 and we're still in it, and we're still going down further. And even in 1929, the Depression, there were ups and downs, right? It didn't just go straight down. So stock market recovered, looked like okay for a while, then it comes back. Things got worse. So you kind of have to look at a longer picture and see, are people really better off today than they were 2008, 2010? And I think the answer is, especially in the United States and other parts like Europe, people are in worse shape now than they were in 2008. Further in debt. Yeah. In Canada especially, there's more debt. Canadians are more indebted now than Americans were.
With all the bailout packages,
Yeah.
like with Obama, right? He's done worse than Obama. Bush has done.
So nothing's been fixed in the economy, right? And people have less money. Houses are worth less, especially again in the United States. Stock market is falling again. Europe is crashing. China is slowing down. Like the whole economic system is starting to slow down because of debt. So I don't think we're out of a depression. I don't think we ever got out of the depression. I think it's just getting worse. Is that okay? Anybody else? Any other questions? Anyone else with a question? No? Okay, Zenny?
Okay, there's another question here. You're asking. It's not that we have money, right? But if you have money in the bank, do you think where do we put it now? It's not safe in the bank. It's not safe anywhere. So where do you put it? Under the desk.
Yeah, I think. When it comes to money, I don't want to make too many comments about it, but I'd say it's, it's going to take time for things to get worse and worse and worse, right? I like what David Gates said was you make very short-term plans, right? You make, is your money safe tomorrow? Probably. Is your money safe in 2 or 3 years? I don't know, right? You can only plan so far, right? So today, is your money relatively safe? Do you have it spread around? Do you have your debts paid off? You have to do a little house cleaning. Yeah, you can't. There's no one safe place to put your money. I don't think. Because a lot of different things can happen. That's not. No commercial.
Advertising.
Turn it off.
You can turn it off now.
Yeah.
So so Zen, what I'm saying? There's I can't give you all those answers. I don't know. The short answer is I don't know. I don't know when things are going to get worse. In the United States, there are real concerns, right? In Europe, people are taking money out of their banks. People are quickly taking money out of their banks, so that's happening. In Canada, no, that kind of stuff isn't happening, but it could happen very quickly, right? It doesn't take much. When back in 2008, when Lehman Brothers failed, all of a sudden it was very quick. It happened very quickly. So, you have to be kind of balanced, but you can't put all your eggs in one basket either, kind of thing, right? You still need to be able to do your regular business every day. Maybe you want to have a little bit of money saved aside, But I also think that we really should be supporting the gospel work, supporting the work of the church as much as possible as well, right? And not worry as much about our retirement as much as doing God's work as well. But I can't. Everybody's a bit different, so I don't know how much money everybody has, so I can't tell you what to do with your money, right? But be careful, spread it around, make sure you're safe. and be smart, but also don't forget that, trust God, right? Trust God. And I think Ellen White says we should pray to God, lay it all on the table, right? Put everything on the table and say, God, lead us on how to use our money wisely. So I think that's the best advice. Yes, Zenny.
They're talking about this December 2012. What is that tradition?
I don't know. Is that the Mayan calendar thing?
The Mayan
Yeah,
calendar.
what is that Mayan calendar?
I think that they ran out of ink, and so they finished the calendar in December 2012.
I could.
Yeah.
It's not. People are saying that the Mayans predicted the end of the world in December 2012, but it's not really what happened. They just kind of stopped writing their calendar. There was kind of, I wasn't there, but it seems to be more along the lines of, that's enough. Or it seems to be like that's kind of just the end of when they thought that their civilization would have to keep account of history or something. So it's the end of when the Mayans care about history, but the people who are trying to make it sound like that's the end of the world are, I think there's going to be a lot of people who are like, oh, it's January 1st, 2013. I guess we shouldn't take anyone seriously who says the end is soon. So I think that's the only danger there.
Yeah, I believe you're right. That's the biggest danger, is that there's all of these false predictions will take away, and even Ellen White said that, right? People at her time were kept setting more dates, and every time they would fail, more people would lose faith. Right? So that's the problem with all these false predictions. Yeah. Yes, sorry, in the back.
Yeah. Well, I was actually kind of thinking like, in the 50s or 60s or even earlier, there seems to be, the lifestyle was kind of slower than now, but they didn't have any computer technology or any type of technology. But now it seems to be like in our IT or all the technologies taking over our sort of economical, our job opportunities, or even it looks like young people seems to have more difficulty to find a job,
Yes.
or even earning more money
Yes.
than before in our parents' generation or even grandparents' generation.
Yeah.
And do you think that there's some IT or new technology has some effects on that kind of thing, in terms of earning more money? Because it looks like job opportunities are very, very scarce right now, and it is somehow very difficult to get a job.
Yeah.
And then even you get a job, you don't have any sort of, you don't even feel like you really worked so hard to earn the money, and then you don't get the money that you expected. It's something like you get only just a tiny little single, type of earning some little bit of money and just answering the phone, something like that. Or the computer is taking over our human job. Do you think sort of like our technology now we are having is taking away some opportunity to earning some more money nowadays than before?
Definitely.
Some effect on it?
Yeah. Actually, I read an article that said, all of the productivity, all of the gains in our economy in the last 10 years was really from productivity increases, right? Getting more productivity out of existing workers because of technology and automation. There's less people employed because there's more technology involved, right? So, technology is taking away a lot of their jobs. It does make our jobs somewhat easier, but fewer people are doing more work, right? And that means those people who have really good jobs, they'll continue to do well, while other people, hard to find jobs, they struggle, they can't find a decent job. And I think that is the way of the world right now. That's definitely what's happening to a lot of our young people. You look at places like Spain, their youth unemployment rate for people under 25, I think is like 45% or something like that, right? There's places in the world where the unemployment among the young people is so high, and that's very discouraging. It's very, very discouraging, and they have a hard time. They have a hard time just being happy because they can't find any work. They can't find any meaning in their lives, right? But I heard a great sermon from, Ivor Myers, one of my favorite speakers. He said, there's a country that has the highest unemployment rate in the world, right? And that's the kingdom of God, he said. We have more unemployed Christians than any other place. There's no excuse for young people not being employed because, especially as far as Christians go, because God's got a work for us to do. And, if we can't find a regular job that pays money, there's lots of missionary jobs and work like that that's available too. And so, if we can't find a regular job, maybe we need to pray and say, oh God, are you trying to tell me something? Right? Are you trying to steer me in a different direction? And give me, are you trying to say maybe I should go into the mission work, right? Or do something, some other work that may be different from the careers that we've been training for. So something that we ought to think about. Unemployment rate in the church should not be as high as it is. Unemployment being doing God's work, not doing God's work. Yes, Mrs. Aka.
今の女性の方がおっしゃったのはね、いわゆるテクノロジーが進むにつれてアンプロイメントが多くなったとおっしゃってますよね。私はオフィスでね20年働いていて5年に1回データエントリーをしてましたけど5年に1回ずつ新しいマシンが変わっていくんですね。で最後の頃になるとそのスーパーバイザーからね今度来るマシンが来たら一つのマシンがね10人分の仕事をしますって教えられました。でそれ何が来たかったら PC が入ってました。本当にねもう仕事が本当にチームやと働いてる人たちもいろんなところにこう移されたと。だからこういろいろ発展してるのはいいですけどね仕事がなくなるってことは確かですよね。まあ今ちょっとそういうことが気がつきました。
She was saying she used to work in OHIP and she used to do what they call key punch, data entry, right? So you remember, computers used to be run by these computer cards, right? You punch holes in them and you run them, and some of you older guys are going, "Yep, I remember those." But that's what you should do.
10人分の仕事をする。私たち信じられなかったけどね、本当にそうなんです。
Yeah. So she said that every few years they would bring in a new machine that was a little bit faster and a little bit easier to use. But towards the end, just before she retired, their supervisor said, "Well, we're going to get a machine soon that this one machine will take the place of 10 people." And what they brought in was a PC. And they started using the PC, and once they started doing that, all these people. She used to work in this group where everybody would do data entry, and they didn't need that anymore. So lots of people got let go. But I think that's just the way that technology influences the way our society is. And, some things are positive, like can you imagine today without any computers, right? Most of us couldn't imagine living a life without computers, no email, no Facebook, no surfing, no Google. Couldn't even imagine, right? So there's lots of good things about it, but it certainly makes things difficult for young people sometimes trying to find jobs. But I also think that the technology is also going to be a big factor in the spreading of the gospel too, right? I think Ellen White says that the publishing work will be one of the important means for spreading the gospel, right? For planting seeds, right? Eventually we're going to have to get out there and it's going to be face-to-face kind of work that we have to get done. But in the beginning, we have to spread the seeds, right? Spread the seeds of the gospel first before we can go and reap the harvest. And those seeds are going to be planted by a lot of, I think, Facebook and emails and blogs and websites and videos, DVDs, satellite uplinks. Like all of this technology, I think, will help us to do the work of planting the seeds, but then we need to go in there and start harvesting those seeds, which that's going to take the face-to-face, one-on-one type of work that we need to get done as well. Sorry, anybody else have? Somebody else have? Yes, Pastor.
Sister White said that we should have the church in town, but we should live in the countryside. So I know that Tim, you moved to the countryside, and what are the benefits of living in the countryside?
Lots of benefits. Yeah, I think
regarding the financial crisis.
Yeah, financial crisis. Well, I started growing my own food, so that's good. I think the thing though, it's going to take a lot more growing to feed me for the whole year, right? It's nice to have a few tomatoes and cucumbers and things like that, but it's going to take a lot more food than that to keep me alive. So I think there's a lot for me to learn still about gardening, and I've read where it said if you have 1 acre of land, you can grow enough food for a family for a year. So I've got a lot of work to learn how to do that still. But for me, growing up, going to the country was not just about the financial crisis, but it was about moving to a place that's away from the influence of the city and being able to have a more spiritual life and fresh air, clean water. And, I think there's a lot of benefits for living in the country, and it is cheaper too. It's cheaper, the houses are cheaper, and so those kinds of things are also very positive. It's something that you have to consider very carefully in prayer. Right? You can't rush off and sell your house tomorrow or anything like that. But it's something that we should be thinking about. One of the quotes yesterday, and I didn't read it, but was about the unions. She said, that's why, she said, the unions are going to cause all these problems, and that's why I've told you repeatedly that you should move out of the city, right? If you think about, why is that? Well, because in the city, who controls all the water and electricity and the transportation and services, garbage pickup? Who controls all of that? Unions, right? And so if the unions are striking and protesting and rioting, then you're going to have a very difficult life in the city. But none of those things will affect me in the country. Right? I can live and work in the country, and I have my own well, I have my own, well, I have a bit of food anyways. I have to grow more. But, I don't have to worry about, and if they cut off my electricity, so what?
Solar.
I can, yeah, it should get solar. Yeah. Yes.
One more. Okay. In the Bible, it says that since we have no money, financial collapse, it says in the Bible that no one could buy.
Yeah.
So when you have no money, no more store, no more, what are you going to do when you cannot buy or sell?
Yeah. So,
when there's no money.
Ellen White said that there are 4 Elijahs. Right? There are 4 Elijahs. Right? There was Elijah back in the Old Testament time. John the Baptist was an Elijah figure. Right? The early church was also an Elijah, or I think it was that. Yeah. And then the people of the end times, the remnant, is also an Elijah figure, right? Now, the only thing about the Elijah thing that I think is, well, not the only thing, but the thing about Elijah that is relevant is, how did Elijah get fed? By the ravens. Right? God looked after him. So you know, if you think about Elijah, what did he, you know, when God said, go and talk to Ahab, right? I like that story because what did Elijah do? Well, he went in there and told Ahab off, right? He said, you know, because you've been against me, I'm not going to send rain for three years, right? But if you look at it, then it said, oh, then God told him, okay, now go to the brook Cherith and there, and I'll feed you with ravens. So, you know, Elijah went to see King Ahab without really being told what the next part of that plan was. He wasn't told, okay, go to Ahab, and then I'm going to, you know, send you to this brook, and I'm going to feed you with ravens, and then, like, he didn't give him the whole plan. He just said, go to Ahab, and Elijah did, right? And then, you know, so God doesn't necessarily reveal his plans to us all at once, but if we trust him, he takes care of us, right? If we do what he asks us in faith, then I think then he will do his part and make sure that he takes care of us.